The words left Wayne's mouth before his brain could stop them. "Sir, that's my mom's handwriting." The sentence fell into the silence of the 37th floor like a stone dropped down a well. You couldn't see the bottom, but you knew something was about to break. Agnes Quinn stood frozen near the mahogany door, her gray cleaner's uniform a stark contrast to the floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the glittering nightscape of the city below. Her hand, still clutching the handle of the forgotten cleaning cart, trembled slightly. The feather duster in her other hand hung limp, as if it too had forgotten its purpose. Wayne's small brown finger pointed at the wall, at the framed certificate that hung like a trophy behind the CEO's desk. The document that had built Collins Dynamics into a billion-dollar empire. Neuralink interface for adaptive prosthetic control. Gold filigree bordered the heavy linen paper, and at the bottom an elegant signature in confident cursive. Tim Collins looked up from his wheelchair, the pen in his hand hovering over a contract he no longer saw. His sharp blue eyes moved from the 14-year-old boy to the woman in the cleaning uniform, then back to the certificate on the wall, the foundation of everything he'd become. Before we begin, click subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more wonderful stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now let's get into the story. Wayne felt his throat tighten as the weight of what he'd just said settled over the room. His mom's memory had been slipping for months, but his memory was crystal clear. That signature, the looping Q that slid gracefully beneath the baseline like a ribbon, the distinctive cross on the lowercase os n that tilted just slightly to the right. He'd seen it 1,000 times on birthday cards, on permission slips, on the grocery list stuck to their refrigerator with a faded magnet. "Mom writes like that," Wayne said again, softer now, his voice barely above a whisper. "She always has." Agnes blinked rapidly, her gaze darting between her son and the framed document. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came. Something flickered across her face. Recognition? Fear? Or the fog of a memory trying desperately to surface from deep water? Tim Collins's jaw tightened. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, with deliberate slowness, he set down his pen. The click of metal against mahogany echoed through the vast office. "Mr. Quinn," he said, his voice measured, professional, the voice of a man who had built an empire by controlling every variable in the room. "That's quite an observation." But his hands resting on the arms of his wheelchair had gone pale. Wayne watched as the CEO wheeled himself toward the certificate, the soft whir of the motorized chair the only sound cutting through the tension. Tim stopped directly beneath the frame, tilting his head back to study the signature he must have looked at 10,000 times before. Agnes's breath hitched. Her knuckles were bone white around the cart handle. Wayne recognized that look, the same expression she wore when she couldn't remember whether she'd taken her medication that morning, or when she'd call him by his father's name before catching herself. "Wayne," she whispered urgently, tugging at his sleeve. "We should go. We're bothering Mr. Collins." But Wayne couldn't move. He couldn't unsee what he'd seen. The elegant loops, the precise slant, the small flourish at the end of Quinn that his mother always said looked like a bird taking flight. Tim Collins turned his wheelchair slowly, his expression unreadable. For 15 years, he'd been told the inventor behind the Neuralink interface was a reclusive engineer who'd vanished after the patent sale, someone who wanted no part of the corporate world, who'd taken the money and disappeared. But now, a 14-year-old boy was pointing at his mother, a woman who cleaned his office every Tuesday and Thursday evening for minimum wage, and claiming the signature that launched his company belonged to her. Tim reached for the phone on his desk. "Security," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving Agnes. "I need you to pull an employee file for me." Wayne felt his stomach drop. Agnes's hand tightened on his shoulder, her whole body rigid with fear. "Agnes Quinn," Tim continued, his voice cold now, analytical. "Cleaning staff. I want everything, hiring date, background check, previous employment." He hung up and wheeled back to face them. The city lights behind him cast his face in shadow, making it impossible to read his expression. "Mrs. Quinn," he said softly, dangerously, "how long have you worked for Collins Dynamics?" Agnes's voice came out as barely a whisper. 5 years, sir. 5 years, Tim repeated, his gaze drifting back to the certificate. And in all that time, you never thought to mention that you might have authored the very technology this building was constructed to house? The question hung in the air like smoke. Wayne looked up at his mother, desperate for her to defend herself, to explain. But Agnes just stood there, her eyes wide and glassy, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. And in that moment, Wayne realized with a cold, sinking dread, his mother didn't remember. Whatever had happened 15 years ago, whatever truth was buried in that signature, she'd lost it somewhere in the fog of her damaged mind. Tim Collins saw it too. His expression shifted from suspicion to something else, something Wayne couldn't quite name. Not quite guilt, not quite recognition, but something that looked like the first hairline crack in a dam that had been holding back a flood for far too long. I think, Tim said slowly, wheeling toward a filing cabinet along the wall, we need to have a longer conversation. Both of you, sit down. It wasn't a request. Tim Collins didn't believe in coincidences. 30 years in the tech industry had taught him that patterns emerge for reasons, that chaos only looked random until you found the algorithm underneath. And right now, staring at the employee file his security chief had just delivered, he could feel the algorithm beginning to click into place, and it terrified him. The file was thin, unremarkable. The kind of background check that got rubber stamped by HR 1,000 times a year. But it was the name that made his hands go cold against the wheelchair's armrests. Quinn. He looked up at the woman and boy still standing in his office. Agnes had her arm around Wayne's shoulders now, a protective gesture that seemed both instinctive and fragile. Her eyes were downcast, fixed on the polished marble floor, as if she might find answers there. Wayne, meanwhile, watched Tim with an intensity that made him deeply uncomfortable, the kind of gaze that expected truth, even demanded it. Mrs. Quinn, Tim said carefully, closing the file and setting it on his desk. I think there's been a misunderstanding here. Liar, a voice whispered in the back of his mind. You know exactly what's happening. Why don't I walk you both out? Tim continued, maneuvering his wheelchair around the desk with practiced ease. It's late, you should get home. Wayne didn't move. You didn't answer my question. Tim paused. What question? When your security guy was on the phone, he read her file out loud. Wayne's jaw tightened. Why is my mom's name in the company directory? I mean, not just as a cleaner, there was another file, an old one from before. The boy was too observant, too sharp. Tim felt the familiar weight of guilt settle deeper into his chest. That old companion that had lived there for 15 years, so constant he'd almost forgotten it was there. Tim's throat went dry. That's probably just a coincidence. Quinn is a common name. But even as he said it, his face betrayed him. He felt the heat rising to his cheeks, the slight tremor in his hands. Wayne saw it too. The boy's expression shifted from suspicion to something harder. Certainty. You're lying, Wayne said quietly. Wayne, Agnes whispered, her voice trembling. Don't be rude. He is, Mom. Wayne turned to face Tim fully. You know something. About her. About that signature. Tim forced himself to breathe, to think, to calculate the least damaging path forward. But his mind kept circling back to that handwriting. Those elegant loops and careful crosses. The same handwriting he'd seen 15 years ago on blueprints and technical specifications. Before the fire, before the lawyers got involved, before everything got buried under NDAs and shell corporations and the relentless machinery of corporate success. Look, Tim said, trying to inject firmness into his voice. I understand you're concerned, but this really isn't the time or place. Let me have my driver take you both home, and we can... I want to see it, Wayne interrupted. See what? The old file, the one with her name on it. Tim's stomach dropped. There's no file. Then you won't mind if we look. The silence that followed was suffocating. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city glittered indifferently. Millions of lights representing millions of people who had no idea that on the 37th floor of Collins Dynamics, a 14-year-old boy was unraveling a lie that had cost billions to maintain. Tim made a decision. It was the wrong one. He knew it even as he made it. But the alternative was worse. Send them home now and the boy would dig. He'd ask questions. He'd find people who remembered. Better to control this, to manage it, to show them just enough to satisfy curiosity while protecting the deeper truth. All right, Tim said quietly. Come with me. He wheeled toward the door, not waiting to see if they followed. He could hear their footsteps behind him, Agnes's hesitant shuffle, Wayne's determined stride, as they moved through the empty corridor. The building was mostly deserted at this hour, just the cleaning crews and a few workaholics burning midnight oil in the development labs. The elevator ride down was silent. Tim watched the numbers descend, 36, 35, 34, and tried to convince himself he was still in control, that he could show them the archive, let them see the directory listing, explain it away as administrative error or identity confusion, then send them home. Move on. Nothing would change. Nothing would change. But he didn't believe that anymore. The archive room was in the basement, a climate-controlled vault that housed 15 years of patents, prototypes, in the paper trail of Collins Dynamics' rise from startup to empire. Tim's key card opened the heavy door with a soft beep, and fluorescent lights flickered to life, illuminating rows of industrial shelving packed with binders and file boxes. The company keeps hard copies of everything, Tim explained, his voice echoing slightly in the concrete space. Redundancy, in case the digital systems fail. He wheeled down the main aisle, his eyes scanning the labels. Research and development, legal, finance, patents, and there on a shelf marked Neuralink, Foundation Series, a row of thick binders organized by year, boss, and version number. His hand froze on the wheelchair's controls. There was a label he'd forgotten about. Or maybe he'd never let himself actually see it before. White paper, printed in clean black font. Neuralink Beta, Quinn 4. Wayne saw it at the same instant. He moved forward, reaching up toward the shelf. Don't, Tim started, but Wayne had already grabbed the binder, hefting his considerable weight into his arms. He carried it to a nearby table and opened it. The first page was a title sheet. Neuralink Interface based on Adaptive Prosthetic Control Framework. Primary researcher, Dr. Agnes M. Quinn, Ph.D., Neuroscience. Wayne's breath came out in a sharp gasp. Agnes, standing behind him, made a small sound, something between recognition and pain. Her hand reached out, trembling, to touch the page. I wrote this, she whispered. Didn't I? Tim couldn't speak, couldn't move. He just watched as Wayne turned the pages, revealing sketch after sketch of neural pathways, signal maps, interface designs, all annotated in that unmistakable handwriting. Margin notes like, try alternate frequency modulation here, and empathy matrix needs recalibration. And then, on page 47, a quote written across the top of a whiteboard photograph, in Agnes's elegant script. Neural empathy isn't about machines learning humans. It's about humans remembering to feel. Tim felt something crack inside his chest. That quote, that exact quote, was engraved on a bronze plaque in the company's main lobby. He'd been credited with it for over a decade. They'd put it on promotional materials, annual reports, his biography in Forbes. It wasn't his. It had never been his. Wayne looked up at Tim, and there were tears in the boy's eyes now. Not sad tears, angry ones. You stole this from her, Wayne said, his voice shaking. All of it. You stole her life. No, Tim said automatically. It wasn't like that. I didn't know. But the lie died on his lips because he had known. Maybe not all of it. Maybe not the full scope of the betrayal. But he'd known enough. He'd seen Agnes's name on the early contracts. He'd let the lawyers make it disappear. He'd let Leon Hart and Jonas Pike handle the complications. He'd signed the papers and taken the patents and built an empire on a foundation he'd been too afraid or too ambitious to examine too closely. Wayne, Agnes said softly, pulling her son back. We should go. We shouldn't be here. But Wayne shook her off. No, Mom, this is yours, your work, your name. He took it. Enough, Tim said. And the word came out harder than he intended. He wheeled forward, putting himself between Wayne and the binder. I'm calling you a car. Both of you are leaving. Now. Wayne opened his mouth to protest, but Agnes's hand on his shoulder stopped him. She was crying silently now, tears streaming down her face, but there was something else in her expression. A terrible dawning understanding. Pieces of memory clicking into place like tumblers in a lock. Tim pulled out his phone and called his driver. 3 minutes later, they were in the elevator, heading back up. The ride was silent, except for Agnes's quiet breathing and the soft hum of the machinery. When they reached the lobby, Tim's driver was already waiting at the curb, a black sedan with tinted windows. Take them home, Tim instructed. Wherever they need to go. Wayne glared at him one last time before helping his mother into the car. The door closed and they pulled away into the night, leaving Tim alone in the vast, empty lobby with its marble floors and its bronze plaque and its monstrous, beautiful lie. He wheeled himself back to the elevator, back down to the archive, back to that binder. For an hour, maybe more, he sat in the fluorescent light, turning pages, looking at Agnes's handwriting, her brilliance, her meticulous attention to detail, seeing, really seeing what had been there all along, the truth he'd spent 15 years avoiding. His hands shook as he reached the final pages. The stability algorithm that had made the Neuralink commercially viable, the breakthrough that had saved his company, the innovation that had made him a legend. All in her handwriting, all her genius. It was 11:47 p.m. when he finally pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he needed, Dr. Fiona Cross, Medical Ethics Director. She was the only person in the company he trusted completely, the only one who might help him navigate what came next. The phone rang twice before she answered, her voice groggy with sleep. Tim, it's almost midnight. What's... Fiona, he interrupted, his voice hollow. I think we have a problem. What kind of problem? Tim looked down at the binder one more time, at the name printed clearly on every page. The kind I've been living in for 15 years, he said quietly, and I don't know how to get out. The morning comes in fragments. First, the sound of water running in the bathroom. Then Wayne's voice, soft and patient, telling her the cereal is on the table. Then the smell of toast, burnt, because he always forgets to adjust the setting. And underneath it all, the faint chemical tang of cleaning solution that never quite washes out of her skin. Agnes sits at the small kitchen table in their apartment, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that's gone lukewarm. She doesn't remember making it, doesn't remember sitting down. But here she is, and Wayne is across from her, watching her with those careful eyes, the eyes of a child who's learned to be a caretaker. Mom, he says gently, did you take your pills? She blinks. Did she? The pill organizer sits on the counter, its Tuesday compartment still full. So no, she didn't. I'll take them now, she says, starting to rise. I've got it. Wayne is already up, filling a glass with water, bringing her the pills. He sets them down in front of her with the same practiced efficiency a nurse might use. 14 years old and already he moves through the world like someone 3 times his age. She swallows the pills, white one for blood pressure, blue one for anxiety, small yellow one she can never remember the name of, and tries to smile at him. Thank you, baby. You're welcome. He sits back down, picks at his own breakfast, doesn't eat much. He's worried. She can always tell when he's worried. Agnes looks down at her apron, still draped over the back of her chair from last night. Gray fabric, worn thin at the edges, with deep pockets that always seem to accumulate things. Pens, paper clips, lint, receipts. She reaches into one pocket absently, her fingers finding something stiff and plastic. A visitor badge, white cardstock with a clip. Collins Dynamics, 37th floor, visitor printed in bold black letters. And below it, yesterday's date. The moment she sees it, something shifts. A door opening in her mind, not all the way, just a crack, letting through slivers of light and sound. Glass. So much glass. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting city lights like stars caught in ice. A frame on a wall. Gold edges. Important looking. Wayne's voice, young and certain. That's my mom's handwriting. And then, older memories, deeper down, fighting their way up through layers of fog. the sharp smell of solder and ozone. Blueprints spread across a lab table. Her own hand, younger, steadier, drawing circuit diagrams with a fine-point pen. A man laughing somewhere behind her, not unkindly but with an edge. Not Tim Collins, someone else. Someone whose face she can't quite... Mom? Wayne's voice pulls her back. She's gripping the visitor badge so hard the plastic edges are digging into her palm. Sorry, she whispers. I was just remembering something. Wayne leans forward. What were you remembering? She tries to hold on to it, the loam, the blueprints, the laughter, but it's already slipping away, dissolving like sugar in water. I don't know, it's gone. He reaches across the table and takes her hand. His palm is warm, solid, real. Mom, last night, at Mr. Collins's office, do you remember what happened? She wants to say no, wants to retreat back into the comfortable fog where nothing hurts because nothing is quite clear enough to hurt. But Wayne is looking at her with such desperate hope that she forces herself to try. We went to get my cart, she says slowly. I forgot it. Yeah, and then? You said something about my handwriting. The memory is there, but it's like looking at something through frosted glass. She can see shapes, but no details. Wayne nods. I saw your handwriting on a patent, Mom. A document hanging in his office. It said your name, Dr. Agnes M. Quinn. He pauses, watching her face. You were a scientist. Before. The word lands like a stone in stale water, sending ripples outward. Scientist. The syllables feel both foreign and familiar in her mouth. I clean offices, she says weakly. Now you do. But before, Mom, there's a whole file with your name on it. Research papers, designs, all in your handwriting, the Neuralink interface. You created it. Fear rises in her throat, cold and sharp. No, that's not... I would remember something like that. I would... But would she? How many mornings has she woken up not knowing what day it was? How many times has Wayne had to remind her of appointments, conversations, whole chunks of time that simply vanished from her mind like they never existed? The doctors had told her it was from the accident, 15 years ago, a head injury, they said, trauma to the hippocampus. Memory loss was common with that kind of damage. She'd accepted it because what else could she do? You can't fight an enemy you can't remember. But now Wayne is telling her the enemy has a name, has a face, has a billion-dollar company built on what he stole from her. I don't... She presses her palms against her temples. I can't think about this right now, Wayne. It's too much. He looks like he wants to argue, but before he can, there's a knock at the door. They both freeze. It's barely 8 in the morning. Nobody knocks at 8 in the morning. Wayne gets up slowly, walks to the door, peers through the peephole. It's a woman, he says quietly. Professional looking. I don't recognize her. Agnes's heart rate kicks up. Don't open it. But Wayne is already turning the lock. The woman standing in the hallway is tall, black, with close-cropped natural hair and an air of calm authority. She wears a burgundy blazer and carries a leather portfolio. Her expression is kind but serious. Wayne Quinn, she asks. Who's asking? My name is Dr. Fiona Cross. I work at Collins Dynamics, Medical Ethics Director. I'm here to speak with your mother. May I come in? Agnes stands up, her legs unsteady. What do you want? Fiona's eyes meet hers, and there's something in that gaze. Compassion, maybe, or recognition. Mrs. Quinn, I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here because Tim Collins asked me to look into something. And what I found, I think you deserve to know about it. Wayne steps aside reluctantly, and Fiona enters their small apartment. She doesn't comment on the worn furniture, or the water stain on the ceiling, or any of the 100 small indignities of poverty. She just sits down at the table, sets her portfolio in front of her, and folds her hands. 15 years ago, Fiona begins, you were admitted to a private medical clinic following a lab accident. You suffered severe head trauma, partial amnesia, and were in a coma for 3 weeks. Agnes feels the air leave her lungs. Wayne sits down beside her, his hand finding hers again. The clinic was expensive, Fiona continues, Top-tier neurological care, round-the-clock monitoring, experimental treatments to preserve cognitive function. The bills ran into the hundreds of thousands. We don't have that kind of money, Agnes whispers. No, but someone paid them. All of them. Fiona opens her portfolio and pulls out a document, a ledger of some kind, with dates and dollar amounts. The payments were authorized through a medical research grant administered by Collins Dynamics. The grant was set up by the company's legal counsel, Jonas Pike, and funded through a shell corporation. Wayne leans forward, his eyes scanning the numbers. Tim Collins paid for my mom's treatment? Unknowingly, I believe, Fiona says carefully. The grant was buried in the books as a research expense. Collins signs hundreds of documents a month. He wouldn't have seen this one specifically. But yes, technically, Collins Dynamics has been funding your mother's care for 15 years. The room tilts. Agnes grips the edge of the table to steady herself. Why would they pay for her care and then make her disappear? Why save her life and steal her work? There's more, Fiona says. She pulls out another document, a photocopy of admission notes from the clinic. The attending physician noted that you kept trying to write equations. Even in the early stages of recovery, when you could barely speak, you'd write on anything you could find. Magazines, napkins, the margins of your medical charts. Agnes's hands start to tremble. She can almost see it, her younger self confused and broken, reaching for something she couldn't quite name. The doctor described your handwriting as distinctive, Fiona continues. He noted the looped Q and the slanted cross on the lowercase n. Wayne inhales sharply. That's how I knew. That's how I recognized it. Fiona nods. Mrs. Quinn, I think someone at Collins Dynamics buried your identity deliberately. They paid to keep you alive, but they also paid to keep you silent. And I think Tim Collins is only now beginning to understand what happened. Before Agnes can respond, there's a soft sound at the door. Not a knock this time, but something being slid underneath. Wayne stands, crosses the room, bends down to pick up a brown envelope. He opens it, and his face goes pale. Mom, he says, his voice shaking, you need to see this. He hands her the envelope. Inside is a single sheet of paper, a photocopy of the patent certificate from Tim Collins's office. Her signature at the bottom, circled in red marker. And above it, printed in block letters, stay out of grown-up matters. Agnes stares at the paper, her heart pounding so hard she can hear it in her ears. Someone knows. Someone is watching. Someone wants them to stop asking questions. Fiona stands quickly, moves to the window, peers out at the street below. Did you see who delivered that? Wayne shakes his head. It was already there when I opened the door. We need to go, Fiona says, her voice urgent now. All of us, right now, if someone knows I'm here. But Agnes can't move. She's staring at the signature on the paper, at the elegant loops and careful crosses, and something is breaking open inside her mind. Not a door this time. A dam. The lab. The fire. The man laughing, no, not laughing, arguing. You can't release it like this, Agnes. It's not ready. It is ready. I've triple-checked the stability algorithm. The investors won't wait. We file now or we lose everything. Then we lose everything. I won't sign off on something that could hurt people. And then, sparks, smoke, someone grabbing her arm, a blow to the head. Darkness. Agnes gasps, doubling over. Wayne catches her, his arms around her shoulders. Mom, what's wrong? Mom! But she can't speak, can't breathe, because she remembers now. She remembers everything. Fiona Cross had spent 12 years in medical ethics, and in that time she'd learned that the truth rarely announced itself with fanfare. It hid in spreadsheets, in misfiled documents, in the quiet spaces between what was recorded and what was remembered. And right now, at 2 in the morning in the basement archives of Mercy Hope Medical Center, the truth was beginning to reveal itself one yellowed page at a time. The clinic administrator, a weary-eyed woman named Patricia, who'd been roused from her night shift in patient records, watched as Fiona worked through the admission logs from 15 years ago. You said you were looking for someone specific? Patient AQ, Fiona replied, her fingers moving methodically through the filing cabinet. Female, admitted sometime in late 2010 for head trauma. Patricia peered over her shoulder. AQ? That's not a full name. It's what I was given, which was partially true. Tim Collins had provided Fiona with fragments, dates, partial records, the name Quinn buried in old payroll files. The rest was detective work. Her fingers stopped on a manila folder, thicker than the others, marked with a red confidential sticker. The tab read, ACI Neurotrauma Unit, admitted 11/03/2010. Fiona pulled it carefully, set it on the desk under the harsh fluorescent light, and opened it. The first page was an intake form. Patient name, Agnes Marie Quinn, age 35. Admission reason, severe head trauma, workplace explosion, partial amnesia. Attending physician, Dr. Raymond Holloway. Fiona's pulse quickened. She photographed every page with Adidipum's phone, medical notes, treatment plans, billing statements. The care had been extraordinary, round-the-clock monitoring, experimental cognitive preservation therapy, consultations with the best neurologists in the state, the kind of treatment that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And at the bottom of each billing statement, the same notation, payment authorized. Grant CDG. CDG, Fiona murmured. Collins Dynamics grant. Patricia leaned in. That's unusual. Most grants require the patient's name to be publicly documented. This one's anonymous. Who authorized it? Let me check. Patricia moved to her computer, typed rapidly. The screen flickered with financial records. Here, Grant CDG 2010. Established November 5, 2010, 2 days after Ms. Quinn was admitted. Authorized by, she squinted, Legal Counsel Jonas Pike on behalf of Collins Dynamics Medical Research Division. Fiona's stomach tightened. Jonas Pike. She'd met him once at a company function. Cold eyes, silk suit, the kind of lawyer who made problems disappear. If Pike had set up the grant personally, he'd done it to hide something. Can you trace where the funding came from? Fiona asked. Patricia clicked through several more screens. It's complicated. The money came from a subsidiary called Apex Medical Holdings, which is owned by, more clicking, a company called Trinity Investment Group, which is owned by, her face went pale, Collins Dynamics LLC, a shell corporation within a shell corporation. Classic corporate obfuscation. Legal technically, but designed specifically to hide ownership trails and beneficial relationships. They were laundering the payments through their own companies, Fiona said quietly, to keep Agnes Quinn's treatment off the main books. Why would they do that? Fiona didn't answer. She was already thinking 3 steps ahead. If Collins Dynamics had paid for Agnes's care through hidden channels, someone had wanted her alive but anonymous. Someone had needed her to survive while ensuring she could never threaten the company's interests. Is there anything else in the file? Fiona asked. Personal notes from the medical staff, observations? Patricia flipped through the pages. Here, nursing notes from the recovery period. She pulled out several handwritten sheets. Looks like they documented her behavior during rehabilitation. Fiona scanned the entries. Most were clinical, patient responsive to physical therapy. Speech improving gradually. Memory recall limited to childhood and early adulthood, but then, dated 3 months after admission, a note that made her breath catch. Patient continues unusual behavior noted last week. Despite significant cognitive impairment, she repeatedly attempts to write mathematical equations, uses any available surface, magazine margins, napkins, her own medical charts. When asked what she's writing, patient becomes confused and cannot explain. Handwriting is remarkably precise despite tremor in right hand. Attending believes this may be muscle memory from previous occupation. Patient file indicates pre-injury profession listed as researcher, but no additional details available. Fiona photographed the note, then looked up at Patricia. Is Dr. Holloway still on staff? He retired 8 years ago, but there's someone who might remember her. Patricia picked up the phone, dialed an extension. Carlos, it's Patricia. Are you on the floor tonight? Good. Can you come down to records? I have someone who needs to ask about an old patient. 10 minutes later, an orderly in navy scrubs appeared in the doorway. He was in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. Patricia said you're asking about someone from 2010? Agnes Quinn, Fiona said, showing him the intake photo clipped to the file. A woman with warm brown eyes and natural hair, looking much younger than the exhausted cleaner Fiona had met that morning. Do you remember her? Carlos's face softened immediately. Miss Agnes, of course I remember her. The gentle scientist. Fiona leaned forward. What do you mean, scientist? That's what we called her on the floor, Carlos said, settling into a chair. She was here for almost 6 months. Longest neurotrauma recovery I'd ever seen. Sweet lady. Confused most of the time. Couldn't remember what year it was or where she lived, but she'd write these equations. He gestured in the air, tracing invisible symbols. On everything. We'd bring her magazines to read, and she'd fill the margins with numbers and symbols. Physics, I think, or maybe engineering. Way over my head. Did she ever talk about what happened to her, Fiona asked. Carlos shook his head. Couldn't remember the accident. The doctors said that was normal with her kind of injury. Brain blocks out the trauma to protect itself. But sometimes she'd cry without knowing why, like her body remembered even if her mind didn't. Fiona felt a chill run down her spine. The brain's defense mechanisms could be merciful and cruel in equal measure, erasing unbearable memories while leaving the emotional scars intact. Did anyone ever visit her? She pressed. Not that I saw, which was sad, you know. Most long-term patients, they have family coming through. But Miss Agnes was always alone. Carlos paused. Though there was something odd. About 3 months in, a man in a suit came by. Didn't go into her room, just stood in the hallway looking through the window. I asked if he was family, and he said no, just someone checking on a company responsibility. Cold way to put it. Do you remember what he looked like? White guy, 50s maybe, expensive suit, had this way of looking at things like he was calculating costs in his head. Carlos's eyes narrowed. Why? Is Miss Agnes in trouble? I don't know yet, Fiona said honestly, but I'm trying to make sure she gets the help she needs. She thanked them both, gathered her photographs and notes, and left the clinic as the first gray light of dawn was breaking over the city. In her car, she sat for a long moment, organizing what she'd learned. Agnes Quinn had been a scientist, a researcher whose work was valuable enough that someone had paid enormous sums to keep her alive but hidden. The payments had been deliberately obscured through shell corporations, authorized by Jonas Pike, and buried so deep in the corporate structure that even Tim Collins might not have known they existed. But someone had known. Someone had stood in that hallway 15 years ago, watching Agnes through a window, seeing her reduced to a woman who could only remember how to write equations she no longer understood. Fiona drove straight to Collins Dynamics. She badged into the building at 6:47 a.m., took the elevator to the 37th floor, and found Tim Collins still in his office. He looked like he hadn't slept, his shirt rumpled, eyes red-rimmed. The binder labeled Neuralink Beta, Quinn 4, still open on his desk. You found something, Pa, he said when she walked in. Not a question. Fiona set her phone on his desk and pulled up the photographs, the admission forms, the medical notes, the billing statements with their Shell Corporation authorizations. She watched Tim's face as he scrolled through them, watched the color drain from his cheeks. Jonas Pike set this up, Tim said quietly, his finger hovering over the authorization signature. 2 days after she was admitted. Through shell companies owned by Collins Dynamics, Fiona confirmed. The money came from your accounts, but it was buried so deep you'd never see it in the standard financial reviews. Someone wanted Agnes Quinn alive, but completely erased from the public record. Tim looked up in her, and she saw something break in his expression. The last defenses of a man who could no longer pretend he didn't know what his empire was built on. She wrote equations, Fiona continued, her voice gentle but relentless. Even when she couldn't remember her own name, she wrote equations in the margins of magazines. The nursing staff called her the gentle scientist. She paused. Tim, you've been paying for a ghost you didn't know you stole from. He closed his eyes, his hands resting on the wheelchair's armrests as it trembled. I need to talk to Jonas. That's not a good idea. If he buried this, I need to hear him say it. Tim reached for his phone. Fiona wanted to stop him, but she understood. Some truths you had to hear spoken aloud before you could believe them. She watched as Tim dialed, put the phone on speaker. 3 rings. Then Jonas Pike's smooth, polished voice. Tim, it's not even 7. What's wrong? I found the Quinn files, Tim said without preamble. The silence that followed was absolute. Fiona could hear her own heartbeat in the quiet. I see, Jonas said finally, his tone shifting, no longer polite, now purely transactional. Where are you? In my office with Dr. Cross. Another pause. Tim, I'm going to say this once as your counsel and your friend. Do not open that door. You built your life on what's behind it. Your reputation, your company, your legacy, all of it sits on the other side of that threshold. If you step through, you can't step back. Tim's jaw tightened. A woman's life was stolen, Jonas. A woman's life was saved, Jonas corrected coldly. We paid for her care. We kept her comfortable. We could have done nothing. You could have given her back her name. Her name was a liability. The investors would have pulled out. The patents would have been contested. Everything would have collapsed. I made a choice to protect the company. You made a choice to bury her alive. The line went quiet again. When Jonas spoke next, his voice was hard as steel. Don't do this, Tim. There are people who won't let you. People who've spent 15 years building walls around this. People who will do whatever it takes to keep those walls standing. The call ended. Fiona and Tim stared at each other across the desk, the weight of the threat hanging in the air between them. The final bell rang, and Wayne Quinn pushed through the double doors of Lincoln Middle School with his backpack slung over one shoulder. His mind still churning through everything that had happened in the past 48 hours. His mom remembered, or at least she was starting to. This morning before he'd left for school, Agnes had sat at the kitchen table with Dr. Cross, speaking in fragments. About a lab, about fire, about someone named Leon who'd argued with her the night everything went wrong. The memories were returning like puzzle pieces dumped from a box, and Wayne could see his mother trying desperately to fit them together. He cut across the schoolyard toward the bus stop, earbuds in but no music playing. His mom's rule, always keep your ears open when you're walking alone. She drilled that into him since he was small enough to hold her hand crossing the street, which was why he noticed the man. Black sedan, tinted windows, parked across the street from the school in a spot that wasn't a parking space. Engine running. Wayne had seen enough cop shows to know what surveillance looked like. He kept walking, didn't look directly at the car, but tracked it in his peripheral vision. When he reached the corner and turned, the sedan pulled out and followed. Wayne's heart kicked into overdrive. He walked faster, not quite running, didn't want to show he'd noticed, and turned down a side street lined with row houses. The sedan turned too. Okay, not good. He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over Dr. Cross's number, when a voice called out behind him. Hey kid, Wayne, right? Wayne turned. A man had gotten out of the sedan, white, 40s, wearing khakis and a polo shirt that screamed trying too hard to look harmless. He had a friendly smile that didn't reach his eyes. Do I know you? Wayne asked, keeping his distance. No, we haven't met. I'm Dave. The man walked closer, hands in his pockets in a gesture Wayne recognized as calculated casualness. I work with your mom at Collins Dynamics, in HR. She mentioned you might need a ride home? Lie. His mom had never mentioned anyone named Dave. I'm good, Wayne said. Bus is fine. Come on, it's no trouble. Your mom's worried about you walking around alone after what happened the other night. The smile faded slightly. She told us about your little adventure on the 37th floor. Wayne's stomach went cold. How did this man know about that? Look, kid, I'm just trying to help. The man's voice lost its friendly edge, sharpening into something harder. There are some complicated things happening at the company right now. Adult things. And sometimes when kids start asking questions they don't understand, they can get hurt. You get what I'm saying? Wayne took a step back. I need to go. Wayne, the man moved forward, blocking the sidewalk. Let me be very clear. Your mom has a good job, benefits, steady paycheck. It would be a shame if something happened to jeopardize that. All because her son couldn't leave well enough alone. It was a threat, dressed up in corporate speak, but a threat all the same. Wayne's hand tightened around his phone. His mother's rule echoed in his head. If someone ever makes you feel unsafe, you run. You don't worry about being polite, you just run. So he ran. Down the side street, cutting through Mrs. Patterson's yard, vaulting the low chain link fence, his backpack bouncing against his spine. Behind him, he heard shouting, footsteps pounding pavement. But Wayne knew this neighborhood. Every alley, every shortcut, every place you could disappear if you needed to. He didn't stop until he'd reached the 24-hour bodega 3 blocks from his apartment, bursting through the door past startled customers. The owner, Mr. Rashid, looked up from behind the counter. "Wayne, what's wrong?" "Can I use your phone?" Wayne gasped, hands on his knees. "Please." Tim Collins sat across the conference table from Jonas Pike and felt something inside him calcify into cold, hard certainty. Jonas had arrived 20 minutes ago, summoned by Tim's terse message. "My office, now, bring everything on Quinn." He'd come with a leather briefcase and the same unflappable composure he'd worn for 15 years of depositions, negotiations, and the kind of legal maneuvering that kept corporations breathing and competitors drowning. "Let me be very clear about what happened," Jonas said, his hands folded on the table like a priest delivering benediction. November 2010, Agnes Quinn's lab experienced a catastrophic failure. She was severely injured. The company faced a choice: let the whole project collapse or salvage what we could and move forward. "You stole her patents while she was in a coma," Tim said flatly. "We preserved innovations that would have died with her impaired cognitive state," Jonas corrected. Leon Hart recognized that the Neuralink technology was too valuable to lose. He gathered the surviving data, consolidated the research, and filed the patents under Collins Dynamics LLC. It saved the company. It saved you. Tim's hands tightened on his wheelchair's armrests. Leon orchestrated this. Leon saw an opportunity and took it. That's what entrepreneurs do. Jonas pulled a document from his briefcase, old, yellowed slightly at the edges. "This is the memo Leon sent you in November 2010. You authorized the patent filings based on his recommendation." Tim took the paper with shaking hands. He remembered this, vaguely. It had been a nightmare time. The lab explosion, the insurance investigations, lawyers telling him the company was on the verge of collapse. Leon had said they needed to file emergency patents to protect the IP before competitors swooped in. Tim had signed. He'd signed. "I didn't know Agnes was alive," Tim whispered. "You didn't ask," Jonas said. Not unkindly. "You were 27 years old, terrified of losing everything you'd built, and Leon gave you a solution. You took it. Most people would have." "And the quote?" Tim looked up. "The one in the lobby. Neural empathy isn't about machines learning humans. It's about humans remembering to feel." "I've been credited with that for a decade." Jonas didn't flinch. "That came from a Quinn draft, yes. Leon found it in her notes and suggested you use it. He thought it was powerful." The shame landed like a physical blow. Tim thought of all the interviews where he'd explained the philosophy behind that quote, the TED Talk where he'd presented it as his guiding principle, the biography that called it his defining insight into human-machine interfaces. All of it stolen from a woman who'd trusted him. A woman who now cleaned his office for minimum wage. "Where's Leon now?" Tim asked. "Retired, living in the Cayman Islands. Very comfortably, I might add, on his share of Collins Dynamics' success." Jonas closed his briefcase with a soft click. "Tim, I know this is difficult, but you need to understand something. We saved the company. We saved thousands of jobs. The Neuralink interface has helped millions of people regain mobility. Yes, Agnes Quinn paid a price, but the alternative was that everyone paid a price." "Get out," Tim said quietly. "Tim, get out of my building." Jonas stood, straightened his tie, and walked to the door. He paused at the threshold. "You're making a mistake. The people who helped build this company won't let you tear it down. Not without a fight." The door closed with a soft click. Tim sat in the silence, staring at the memo in his hands, feeling the weight of 15 years of willful ignorance pressing down on his chest like a stone. Wayne badged into Collins Dynamics using his mother's employee ID, the one she'd left on the kitchen counter that morning, when Dr. Cross had taken them to a safe location. The lobby security guard glanced at the badge, then at Wayne. Little young for cleaning staff. Helping my mom, Wayne said, trying to sound casual. She forgot her card again. The guard waved him through. Wayne took the elevator to the 37th floor, his heart hammering the whole way up. He didn't have a plan, exactly, just a burning need to see Tim Collins face to face and make sure the man understood what was at stake. The executive floor was quieter at this hour. Most people had gone home. Wayne walked past empty cubicles and dark conference rooms until he reached the corner office. The door was open. Tim Collins sat at his desk, staring at something in his hands. Wayne knocked on the doorframe. Tim looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Wayne, how did you—" "Someone followed me after school," Wayne said, walking in without waiting for permission. "A man. He threatened me. Threatened my mom's job if I kept asking questions." Tim's face went pale. What did he look like? Wayne described him, the khakis, the fake friendly smile, the black sedan. Tim closed his eyes and Wayne saw something break in the man's expression. "I'm sorry," Timmy said quietly. It's spiraling faster than I thought." Wayne looked past Tim to the wall, to the framed certificate that had started everything. The patent that bore his mother's handwriting, his mother's genius, his mother's stolen life. "I'm going to get her name back," Wayne said, and it wasn't a request or a hope. It was a vow. "I don't care what it takes. I don't care who tries to stop us. She deserves the world to know what she did." Tim nodded slowly. "Yes, she does." Before either of them could say more, Tim's computer chimed with an incoming email. He glanced at the screen, then froze. "What is it?" Wayne asked. Tim turned the monitor so Wayne could see. The email had no sender name, just a string of numbers, no subject line, and a single attachment, an image file. Tim clicked it. The photo was old, grainy, taken from a security camera. It showed a lab, Agnes's lab, Wayne realized, engulfed in flames, smoke billowing, equipment scattered, and in the foreground, barely visible through the haze, a figure lying on the floor. Below the image, a single line of text. "You are not built for what happens when this opens." Wayne felt ice slide down his spine. Tim's hand trembled on the mouse. Someone was watching. Someone knew everything, and they were willing to do whatever it took to keep the truth buried. The lab smells like solder and ozone and the particular kind of exhaustion that comes from 60-hour work weeks. Agnes Quinn stands at the whiteboard, marker in hand, adjusting the stability algorithm for what feels like the 100th time. It's 11:47 p.m. The building is mostly empty except for security downstairs, and Leon Hart pacing behind her like a caged animal. "We need to run the demo tomorrow, Leon says for the third time in as many minutes. The investors are already on planes. It's not ready. Agnes doesn't turn around, just keeps writing. Neat loops and precise crosses. The handwriting that will one day hang on a wall she'll clean for minimum wage. The neural feedback loop destabilizes under sustained load. If we push this to market now, someone could get hurt. So we'll add a disclaimer. Limited use. Beta testing." "No." She caps the marker, turns to face him. Leon Hart is 32, brilliant in the way venture capitalists love. Charismatic, aggressive, always 3 steps ahead. He's also her business partner, the man who turned her research into a fundable startup. "I won't sign off on something that could harm people." Leon's jaw tightens. "Agnes, we're out of time. We're out of money. If we don't close this round of funding, Collins Dynamics dies. Everything we built, gone. Then it dies." Her voice is steady, certain. "I'd rather lose the company than lose someone's life because we rushed." The words hang between them like smoke. Leon pulls out his phone, types something rapidly. "You're making a mistake." "I'm being a scientist." She turns back to the whiteboard, adding the final element to the stability fix. It's elegant, actually, a frequency modulation adjustment that compensates for neural drift. She steps back, admiring it. This is the piece that makes the Neuralink commercially viable. This is the breakthrough. Behind her, she hears Leon on the phone, voice low and urgent. "Yeah, she's refusing. I need you to just get here." Agnes frowns. "Who are you calling at midnight?" someone who understands what's at stake. 10 minutes later, Jonas Pike arrives, the company's legal counsel, expensive suit somehow still crisp despite the late hour. He looks at the whiteboard, at Agnes, at Leon. Dr. Quinn, Jonas says smoothly, Leon tells me you have concerns about tomorrow's demonstration. Not concerns, facts. The system isn't stable enough for human testing. But it could be with this fix. Jonas gestures to the whiteboard. Yes, in 6 months, after proper trials. Jonas and Leon exchange a look, the kind of look that makes Agnes's stomach tighten with unease. What if we filed the patents now, Jonas suggests, protected the IP while you continue development? That gives the investors confidence without rushing the product. Agnes shakes her head. The patents need the stability fix to be complete. That's what makes it valuable. And I won't submit that until I've verified it works safely. Leon steps forward. Agnes, please, just let us document this version. We'll wait for your approval before— No. The word echoes in the lab. Final. Unmovable. Leon's face darkens. He looks at Jonas, some wordless communication passing between them. Then he walks toward the lab equipment, the prototype Neuralink interface sitting on the test bench, connected to its power supply and control systems. What are you doing? Agnes asks. I'm sorry, Leon says. And he doesn't sound sorry, he sounds cold. You've left us no choice. His hand moves toward the power supply. Agnes starts toward him, but Jonas catches her arm. Doctor, I wouldn't— The spark comes first, a bright blue flash where Leon's hand touches the exposed wiring. Then the smoke. Then the alarm, shrieking through the building like a wounded thing. What did you— Agnes tries to pull away from Jonas, but his grip is iron strong. The fire spreads faster than it should. Too fast. Accelerant. Some distant part of her brain registers. This wasn't an accident. This was planned. Let me go. She fights against Jonas, manages to break free, stumbles toward the test bench. She needs to save the prototype, the data, something. She doesn't see Leon's hand coming until it's too late. The blow catches her temple, sends her sprawling. Her head cracks against the edge of the lab table, and the world tilts sideways, sound and light fracturing into meaningless static. The last thing she sees before darkness takes her is her own handwriting on the whiteboard, the stability fix that will save the company and damn her in equal measure. The last thing she hears is Leon's voice, distant and distorted. Call 911. Make it look like she was alone when it happened. Then nothing. Tim, present day. Conference room, Collins Dynamics. Tim Collins stares at Agnes Quinn across the conference table and watches 15 years of lies disintegrate in real time. She's been talking for 20 minutes, her voice shaking at first, then growing stronger as the memories crystallize. Fiona sits beside her, taking notes. Wayne holds his mother's hand like he's afraid she might disappear if he lets go. The fire, Agnes says, her eyes distant, seeing something Tim can't. It wasn't an accident. Leon started it. Jonas held me back. And when I tried to stop them, Leon— Her hand goes to her temple, to a faint scar Tim had never noticed before. He hit me. Tim feels something collapse inside his chest. I didn't know, he whispers. Agnes, I swear to you, I didn't know. But you remember the call, Fiona says, her voice gentle but relentless. Don't you, Tim? And God help him, he does. It rushes back like a wave. November 2010, 3 in the morning, his phone ringing. Leon's voice, frantic and urgent. Tim, you need to get to the lab. There's been an accident, a fire. Agnes, she's hurt. It's bad. Tim had driven there in his pajamas, arriving to find fire trucks, police, EMTs loading someone onto a stretcher. Leon had grabbed him before he could get close, steered him away from the scene. It's all gone, Leon had said, his face smudged with soot. The lab, the prototype, most of the data. But I salvaged some drafts, some of Agnes's notes. We need to file emergency patents. Tim, right now, before competitors hear about this and swoop in. But Agnes, she's alive. Barely. They're taking her to intensive care. But Tim, we can't wait. The company will die if we don't protect this IP. We can help Agnes later. Right now, we need to save the company. And Tim, young, terrified, desperate, had listened. had signed the papers Jonas thrust in front of him, had filed the patents under Collins Dynamics LLC while Agnes Quinn lay in a coma 3 floors above them in the hospital. I thought, Tim's voice breaks, I thought she was just an employee, a researcher. I didn't know she was my partner. Leon told me, he said you'd sold us your research, that you'd taken the money and wanted no further involvement. Agnes's laugh is bitter and broken. I never saw a dime. Fiona pulls a folder from her briefcase, the fire investigation report she'd unearthed from the compliance vault that morning. The inspectors flagged it, she was said, sliding the document across the table. Right here, page 7. Fire origin consistent with deliberate ignition. Accelerant residue detected near test bench. Recommend arson investigation. Tim reads the notation, then the one below it, stamped in red. Investigation closed. Insufficient evidence. Accidental cause determined. Jonas buried it, Fiona continues, paid the inspectors to change their conclusion. I found the payment records this morning, $25,000 to a consulting firm that doesn't exist. The money trail leads back to Collins Dynamics Legal. Tim feels sick. Everything he'd built, everything he'd become, all of it constructed on a foundation of betrayal and violence. The whiteboard, Agnes says suddenly. Do you have a whiteboard? Wayne points to the wall where a large glass board hangs beside the conference screen. Agnes stands, walks to it like she's in a trance. Fiona hands her a marker. I wrote it that night, Agnes says. The stability fix, the thing that made the Neuralink work. It was on the whiteboard when Leon... Her hand moves across the glass, writing with the same precise loops and slanted crosses. Mathematical notation flows from the marker. Frequency equations, modulation parameters, neural compensation algorithms. Tim watches, his breath caught in his throat. It's beautiful, elegant, the kind of insight that separates competent engineering from genuine innovation. Agnes steps back. The entire board is covered in her handwriting. Her genius, her stolen legacy. That's it, she whispers. That's what I wrote, November 2nd, 2010, the night before everything burned. Tim pulls out his tablet with shaking hands. He navigates to the company's patent database, pulls up patent US 8742-391B2, the Neuralink interface. Scrolls to section 4.7, Neural Stability Algorithm. He reads it aloud, his voice hollow. Adaptive frequency modulation compensates for neural drift through iterative feedback calibration, utilizing phase-locked loop architecture with variable gain coefficients derived from instantaneous signal variance. Then he looks at the whiteboard, at Agnes's equation, at the identical notation. Not similar, not close, but identical. Line for line, symbol for symbol. Every coefficient, every variable, every elegant mathematical flourish. It's the same, Wayne breathes, word for word. Tim nods slowly. He types the equation into his tablet, runs the verification algorithm the company uses to check patent validity. The screen blinks green. Exact match. Primary claim. This equation, Tim says, his voice barely audible, is the core of our patent. It's the innovation that made Collins Dynamics a billion-dollar company. It's been cited in 347 subsequent patents. It's licensed to 72 medical device manufacturers worldwide. He looks up at Agnes, and there are tears in his eyes. And it's yours, all of it, every word, every number, every breakthrough I've been credited with for 15 years. He sets the tablet down, his hands trembling. Leon and Jonas didn't just steal your research, Agnes. They stole your mind. They took the most brilliant work of your life and erased you from it so completely that you forgot it existed. Agnes sinks into a chair, her face in her hands. Wayne wraps his arms around her, and she clings to her son like he's the only real thing in the world. Fiona stands, walks to the window overlooking the city. We have everything we need, she says quietly. The medical records, the payment trails, the fire investigation, Agnes's memory, and now this, mathematical proof that she authored the core patent. What happens now? Wayne asks. Tim wheels himself to face them. For the first time in 15 years, he knows exactly what he needs to do. Now, he says, we tell the truth. All of it, no matter who it destroys. His phone buzzes. An email from an unknown sender. He opens it, and his blood runs cold. Another photo, this one recent, taken from across the street. Agnes and Wayne entering the Collins Dynamics building this morning. A red circle drawn around them. And below it, a single line. Last warning, walk away or everyone you love burns. Tim Collins had built an empire on certainty, the kind of absolute conviction that investors craved and boards of directors rewarded. But sitting in the small anteroom adjacent to the executive boardroom, staring at the three people who held the power to destroy everything he'd become, he felt nothing but doubt. And beneath that doubt, something harder, something that felt almost like relief. The annual shareholder conference is in 3 days, he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. 1,200 attendees, live streamed to 40,000 more. Every major business publication will be there. Every analyst who covers our stock. Fiona Cross sat across from him, her laptop open, files spread across the table like pieces of evidence at a trial. Agnes Quinn occupied the chair beside her, Wayne standing protectively at his mother's shoulder. You want to do it there, Fiona said. Not a question. I want to tell the truth there, Tim corrected, in front of everyone. No private settlements, no carefully worded press releases. Just the truth. Agnes's eyes widened. Mr. Collins, that would destroy your company. It's your company, Agnes. It was always supposed to be. Tim wheeled closer, his expression earnest. And I know this won't undo 15 years. I know nothing can give you back what was stolen. But I can give you your name. I can make sure the world knows who really built the Neuralink interface. He pulled a document from his briefcase, a settlement agreement his lawyers had drawn up that morning. 20 pages of legal language that boiled down to one thing. Money. A lot of it. This is a private settlement offer, Tim explained, sliding it across the table. $50 million. Full medical care for life. A confidentiality agreement that protects both of us. You'd never have to work again. Wayne would have college paid for. You could live anywhere, do anything. Agnes picked up the document with trembling hands, scanned the first page, then set it down like it was contaminated. No, she said quietly. Tim blinked. Agnes, this is hush money. Her voice was stronger now, certain. That's what this is. You're offering to pay me to stay quiet. To let the lie keep living. I'm offering to make you financially secure, Tim countered, to give you the resources you deserve. Agnes shook her head. She pushed the document back across the table, her handwriting suddenly visible on the margin where she'd written a single word. No. I don't want your money, Mr. Collins. I want my name back. She stood, and despite her gray uniform and tired eyes, she seemed to fill the room with quiet dignity. For 15 years, I've been a ghost. I've cleaned offices and forgotten who I was and let the world tell me I was nobody. But I'm not nobody. I'm Dr. Agnes Quinn, and I invented the technology that changed millions of lives. And I will not let you buy my silence so you can sleep better at night. Wayne's hand found his mother's shoulder, and Tim saw the pride shining in the boy's eyes. Then we do it your way, Tim said after a long moment. At the conference, public confession, full disclosure. He looked at Fiona. Can you secure the evidence? Everything we need to prove this? Fiona was already nodding. I've been working on it all morning. I have copies of the Quinn 04 binder, all 300 pages. The clinic ledgers showing the Shell Corporation payments. The fire inspection report flagging probable sabotage. Agnes's medical records documenting her injuries and the memory loss. And the email threats we've been receiving. Whistleblower protections will apply, Tim added, looking at Fiona. Under the Public Interest Disclosure Act, you are protected from retaliation for exposing corporate wrongdoing, criminal offenses, breach of legal obligation, covering up misconduct. This hits every category. Fiona smiled grimly. Jonas Pike threatened me this morning. Told me I'd never work in medical ethics again if I pursued this. I told him to document that in writing so I could add it to my employment tribunal case. Wayne spoke up for the first time. What about physical evidence? Like something that proves Mom worked here before? Her old office or lab notes or the old R&D floor, Agnes said suddenly, her eyes distant with memory. Third floor, where the original lab was before they built the new wing. They mothballed it after the fire, but she looked at Tim. Is it still there? Tim nodded slowly. Nothing's been demolished. It's just sealed off. Asbestos remediation issues, or so I was told. He paused. You think there might be something there? I had a locker, Agnes said. All the researchers did. We kept personal items, notebooks, backup materials. If it wasn't destroyed in the fire, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. 10 minutes later, they stood in front of a locked door on the third floor, a sign reading "Authorized Personnel Only," hazmat zone blocking their path. Tim overrode the lock with his executive key card, and the door swung open with a groan of disuse. The air inside was stale, tinged with the ghost of smoke and chemicals. The floor was exactly as it had been 15 years ago, frozen in time like a crime scene photograph. Burned lab benches, scorched ceiling tiles, equipment covered in dust and ash. Agnes walked through it like a woman navigating a dream. Her feet carried her unerringly past the wreckage to a row of metal lockers along the far wall. She stopped in front of one, ran her fingers over the door. This was mine, she whispered. Wayne looked at the locker. The paint was bubbled from heat, but scratched into the metal surface, barely visible through the damage, were three letters. AMQ, Agnes Marie Quinn. It's locked, Wayne said, pulling at the handle. Tim wheeled forward, examined the lock mechanism. Standard industrial padlock, we can cut it. He pulled out his phone, called facilities. I need bolt cutters on the third floor. Now. They waited in silence, Agnes staring at the locker like it might disappear if she looked away, Wayne photographing everything with his phone, Fiona taking notes in her precise, methodical way. When the facilities manager arrived with bolt cutters, Tim waved him off. I'll handle this. You're dismissed. The man looked confused but obeyed. The moment he was gone, Tim handed the bolt cutters to Agnes. You should do it, he said. It's yours. Agnes took the tool with shaking hands. It took 3 tries. The metal was old, resistant, but finally the lock snapped. The door swung open with a rusty squeal. Inside, untouched by fire, protected by metal and luck and time, was a life. A lab coat, neatly folded. A photo of a younger Agnes with a man in military uniform. Her late husband, Tim guessed. The soldier she'd mentioned in her notes. A coffee mug with "World's Best Neuroscientist" printed on it. A pair of safety goggles. And at the bottom, wrapped in a plastic bag to protect it from moisture, a spiral-bound notebook. Agnes lifted it out with trembling hands. The cover was labeled in her distinctive handwriting. Neuralink Development, Dr. Agnes M. Quinn, July 2010 to November 2010. She opened it. Pages and pages of equations, diagrams, observations. The entire developmental history of the technology that built Collins Dynamics. Every breakthrough, every setback, every elegant solution, all documented in her looping, precise script. It's all here, Agnes breathed. Everything, every version, every iteration. She looked up at Tim, tears streaming down her face. This proves I created it. This is my life's work. Wayne wrapped his arms around his mother, and she clutched the notebook to her chest like a lifeline. Fiona photographed every page methodically, documenting everything. Tim watched in silence, feeling the weight of what this meant, not just for Agnes, but for him, for the company, for everyone who'd built their careers on the foundation of this lie. They were so focused on the locker's contents that none of them heard the footsteps until it was too late. Well, a voice said from the doorway, cold and smooth as polished steel, isn't this touching? They all turned. A man stood silhouetted against the hallway lights, white, late 50s, expensive suit somehow unmarred by the dusty environment. His hair was silver at the temples, his eyes sharp and calculating. Leon Hart. Tim's blood went cold. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same question, Leon replied, stepping into the ruin lab. You're trespassing on a sealed floor. disturbing what should have stayed buried. His eyes landed on Agnes and something dark flickered across his face. Hello, Agnes. You're looking better than the last time I saw you. Agnes took a step back, and Wayne moved in front of her protectively. I should have guessed you'd remember eventually, Leon continued conversationally. The doctors said the memories might come back. I told Jonas we should have been more thorough, but he insisted on keeping you alive, said it was the ethical thing to do. He smiled without warmth. Always knew that would bite us eventually. Get out, Tim said, his voice hard as granite, before I call security. Go ahead, call them. Leon pulled out his own phone, held it up. I've got the board on speed dial. You think they'll side with you after you tell them you're planning to confess corporate fraud at the shareholder conference? That you're going to tank the stock price and expose the company to billions in liability? I don't care what the board thinks. You should. Leon's expression hardened. Because you're not just breaking the company's spell, Tim. You're breaking everything, every partnership, every license agreement, every medical device that uses our patents. You confess, and you don't just destroy Collins Dynamics. You destroy the entire ecosystem we built. An ecosystem built on stolen work, Fiona interjected coldly. Leon's eyes flicked to her. And you are? The person who's going to testify against you when this goes to trial, Fiona said evenly. Corporate fraud, patent theft, attempted murder. That fire wasn't an accident. The inspector's report proves it. You're going to prison, Mr. Hart. Leon laughed, a short, bitter sound. You have no idea what you're breaking. The alliances that keep this company protected. The people in high places who have so much invested in making sure certain truths stay buried. He looked directly at Agnes. You think telling your story makes you brave. It makes you a target. You, your son, anyone who helps you, they will destroy you all before they let this company fall. Wayne's hand found his phone in his pocket. His thumb hit record. Tim wheeled forward, placing himself between Leon and Agnes. Are you threatening us, Leon? I'm warning you. Leon's voice dropped to something dangerous. You built your life on what's behind that door. You don't get to walk away from that and call yourself righteous. You signed in the papers. You took the patents. You stood on stages and accepted awards for work you didn't do. You're just as guilty as I am. The words hit like physical blows, but Tim didn't flinch. You're right, he said quietly. I am guilty, which is exactly why I'm going to confess. In 3 days, in front of everyone, and if that destroys me, then I deserve to be destroyed. Leon's face twisted with rage. You sanctimonious. We're done here, Tim interrupted. Get out, and if you come near Agnes or Wayne again, I'll have you arrested for assault. The medical records from 15 years ago prove you hit her. That's battery. The statute of limitations doesn't apply when the victim had amnesia. For a long moment, Leon just stared at them. At Tim, at Agnes holding her notebook, at Wayne with his phone out, at Fiona with her evidence files. Then he smiled, cold and predatory. You have no idea what you've started, he said, but you will. He turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing down the empty corridor until they faded into silence. The grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel could hold 1,200 people comfortably. This morning it held 1,243, with another 100 standing at the back, and 42,000 more watching via live stream from offices, homes, and conference rooms around the world. The annual shareholder conference of Collins Dynamics was always an event, the kind of gathering where analysts took notes, journalists recorded sound bites, and investors calculated their returns on champagne and canapes. This year felt different. There was an electricity in the air, a tension nobody could quite name. In the wings backstage, Jonas Pike worked his phone with the focused intensity of a man trying to plug holes in a sinking ship. We need to cut his mic, he hissed into the phone, speaking to the head of event production. Technical difficulties. Right when he starts talking about, it won't work, Fiona Cross said from behind him. Jonas spun. Fiona stood there in a sharp charcoal suit, tablet in hand, an expression of serene certainty on her face. We have a redundant stream, she continued. Independent camera crew, direct feed to 3 major news networks. You cut Tim's mic, and it'll just make the story bigger. She smiled without warmth. You should probably find a seat, Jonas. You're going to want to be sitting down for what comes next. Jonas's face went white. Across the backstage area, Leon Hart watched the exchange, his jaw tightening. You're making a mistake, Leon said, moving toward Fiona. All of you. When this company collapses, it'll take thousands of jobs with it. Pension funds, retirement accounts. You'll destroy more than just us. No, Fiona said quietly. You already did that. 15 years ago. We're just telling people about it. Leon's hand moved toward Fiona's tablet, but she stepped back smoothly. Touch me, and I'll add assault to your charges. There are 12 security cameras backstage, Mr. Hart, all recording. The 5-minute warning chimed. The stage manager called for Tim Collins. In the front row of the audience, Agnes Quinn sat in a simple navy dress that Fiona had bought for her 2 days ago. Her hands were folded in her lap, but Wayne could see them trembling. He reached over and took one, squeezing gently. You okay, Mom? Agnes nodded, but her eyes were fixed on the stage, on the massive screens flanking it, on the podium with its microphone, on the Collins Dynamics logo projected in crisp white light. 15 years, she whispered. For 15 years, I thought I was nobody. You were never nobody, Wayne said fiercely, and in about 5 minutes, the whole world is going to know it. The lights dimmed, the crowd quieted. A video began playing on the screens. A slick corporate montage of Collins Dynamics' greatest achievements. The Neuralink interface helping a veteran walk again. A child using a prosthetic arm to hug her mother. An elderly man playing piano with fingers he'd lost to diabetes. Innovation that changes lives, the narrator intoned. Technology that restores humanity. This is Collins Dynamics. The video ended. The screens went dark. And then, from stage left, Tim Collins rolled into view. The applause was thunderous, a standing ovation that seemed to shake the chandeliers. 1,200 people on their feet, clapping for the man who'd built an empire, who'd overcome paralysis to become a legend, who represented everything the tech world wanted to believe about itself. Tim sat at center stage, alone under a single spotlight, and waited for the applause to die. It took almost 2 full minutes. When silence finally fell, Tim looked directly into the camera, past the audience, past the investors and analysts and journalists, straight into the lens that connected him to 42,000 watching eyes. My name is Tim Collins, he said, his voice steady and clear, and everything you just applauded is a lie. The room inhaled sharply, phones came out, fingers flew over keyboards. The Neuralink interface, the technology that built this company, that changed millions of lives, that made me a legend. I didn't invent it. Tim's hands gripped his wheelchair's armrests. The quote engraved in our lobby, the one I've been credited with in every biography and interview. Neural empathy isn't about machines learning humans. It's about humans remembering to feel. I didn't write that. The screens flickered to life. On the left side appeared the certificate from Tim's office, the framed patent with its elegant signature. On the right side, a photograph of a whiteboard covered in equations, dated November 2nd, 2010. At the top, in the same handwriting, the quote. The woman who wrote that, Tim continued, the woman who invented the technology that saved this company, who designed every innovation we've been selling for 15 years. Her name is Dr. Agnes Marie Quinn. The camera found Agnes in the front row. 1,200 heads turned. Agnes froze, Wayne's hand tight in hers as the room tried to reconcile the woman in the navy dress with the ghost they had just been told existed. She worked for me, Tim said. She trusted me. And in November 2010, my business partner Leon Hart orchestrated a lab fire to steal her research. He struck her, leaving her with a traumatic brain injury that caused severe memory loss. And while she lay in a coma, unable to defend herself or her work, we filed patents under Collins Dynamics' name. The screens now showed side-by-side images. Agnes's handwriting from her recovered notebook matched perfectly with the patent documents. Page after page, equation after equation. Identical. The audience gasped, an audible wave of shock rippling through the ballroom. For 15 years, Tim continued, his voice breaking now, the professional composure finally cracking. Agnes Quinn has cleaned offices. She's worked minimum wage jobs. She struggled with memory loss that we caused, that we covered up, that we paid to keep hidden. And all that time, the technology she created made Collins Dynamics billions of dollars. In the back of the room, Jonas Pike stood and tried to leave. Two security guards blocked the exit. He looked around wildly, then sat back down, his face ashen. My legal counsel, Jonas Pike, buried the fire investigation that proved sabotage, Tim said, and the screen showed the inspector's report. The red-stamped case closed, the payment records to the consulting firm that didn't exist. He set up shell corporations to pay for Agnes's medical care while simultaneously ensuring she could never remember what had been stolen from her. Leon Hart bolted. He ran for the side exit, pushing past shocked attendees. But when the door opened, he found himself face to face with two investigators from the state attorney general's office, badges already out. Leon Hart, you're under arrest for corporate fraud, patent theft, and assault causing grievous bodily harm. The investigator's voice carried through the silent ballroom. You have the right to remain silent. The rest was lost in the eruption of noise. Cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions, the crowd surging to their feet. Tim raised his hand, and somehow, impossibly, the room quieted again. Effective immediately, he said, his voice hoarse but determined. I am resigning as CEO of Collins Dynamics. I'm nominating Dr. Fiona Cross as interim CEO, pending board approval. And I'm proposing that all patents related to the Neuralink interface be immediately amended to credit Dr. Agnes Quinn as the primary inventor and founding scientist of this company. The screens changed again, showing Agnes's full CV, her PhD in neuroscience, her published papers, her years of research, everything that had been erased when her memory was stolen. I'm also calling for an independent investigation into all corporate actions taken by Collins Dynamics legal counsel between 2010 and the present, and I'm establishing a foundation in Agnes Quinn's name to provide support for survivors of corporate theft and traumatic memory. Jonas Pike stood again, and this time when security approached him, he didn't resist. He walked out in handcuffs, his expensive suit seeming to diminish with each step. Tim looked directly at Agnes now, not at the camera, not at the audience, just at her. Dr. Quinn, he said, and his voice carried so much shame and regret that it seemed to fill the entire ballroom. I cannot undo what was done to you. I cannot give you back 15 years. But I can give you your name. I can make sure the world knows who you are, and I can spend the rest of my life trying to make this right. He bowed his head. The spotlight on him dimmed slightly, and a new light rose, finding Agnes in the front row. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then someone in the back row stood and started clapping. Then another. Then a whole section. Within 30 seconds, the entire room was on its feet again. But this time, they weren't applauding Tim. They were applauding Agnes. The cameras swarmed toward her. Microphones pushed forward. Journalists shouted questions. Dr. Quinn, how does it feel? What do you want to say to Leon Hart? Will you take a leadership role in the company? Agnes sat frozen, overwhelmed, her son's hand the only anchor keeping her tethered to reality. Wayne looked at her, saw the fear in her eyes, and whispered, You don't have to say anything, Mom. We can just leave. But Agnes shook her head slowly. She stood unsteady at first, then finding her balance. Wayne stood with her, his hands still in hers, and together they faced the room, the cameras, the world. My name, Agnes said, her voice soft but carrying through the microphones, is Dr. Agnes Marie Quinn, and I want you all to know, she paused, tears streaming down her face. I want you to know that I never stopped being a scientist, even when I couldn't remember being one. The room erupted again, not just applause now, but cheers, shouts of support, the sound of something fundamental shifting in the universe. Fiona appeared at Agnes's side, guiding her through the crowd toward a prepared press area. Tim watched from the stage, still under his dim spotlight, as the woman whose life he'd stolen finally stepped into the light that had always been hers. On screens around the world, 42,000 people watched Dr. Agnes Quinn reclaim her name. And in the front row, in the seat Agnes had just vacated, sat her notebook, the one from the locker, with 15 years of genius documented in looping elegant handwriting. Agnes stood in the lobby of Collins Dynamics, staring at the bronze plaque on the wall, and felt time fold in on itself. 6 weeks had passed since the shareholder conference. 6 weeks since her name had been spoken aloud to the world. 6 weeks since everything changed. The old engraving had been removed, the one that credited Tim Collins with words he'd never written. In its place, new bronze gleamed under careful spotlights, the letters cut deep and permanent. Neural empathy isn't about machines learning humans. It's about humans remembering to feel. Dr. Agnes Marie Quinn, founding innovator, Neuralink interface. Wayne stood beside her, reading it for probably the 50th time. He still got a little misty-eyed every time. "It's real, Mom," he said softly. "Your name, right there, forever." Agnes reached out, traced the letters with her fingertips. The bronze was cool, solid, undeniable, not a dream, not a fragment of damaged memory, real. "I keep expecting to wake up," she admitted, "back in our apartment, back to cleaning offices and forgetting where I put my keys." "That life's over, Mom." Wayne squeezed her hand. "You're Dr. Quinn now, head of neurohuman interface research. You have a corner office. You have a team." She did. The press conference 3 weeks ago had made it official. All patents related to the Neuralink interface had been legally amended to list Dr. Agnes Marie Quinn as the primary inventor and founding scientist. Collins Dynamics had offered her a position as head of neurohuman interface research, with full autonomy, a research budget that made her dizzy, and the opportunity to finally continue the work that had been stolen 15 years ago, if she chose to accept. Behind them, the lobby doors opened. Tim Collins wheeled in, his assistant holding the door. He saw them at the wall and wheeled over slowly, cautiously, the way he always approached Agnes now, like she was something fragile he might break again. "Dr. Quinn," he said formally. "Wayne, Mr. Collins." They still didn't know how to talk to each other. The weight of what had happened, what he'd allowed to happen, sat between them like a wall made of guilt and shame and a decade and a half of stolen time. "I wanted to tell you," Tim said, "the foundation paperwork is complete. The Agnes Quinn Foundation for Traumatic Brain Injury Research and Support. First board meeting is next month, if you're still willing to chair it." Agnes nodded. "I am. And I'd like to—" Tim paused, searching for words. "I'd like to ask if I could serve on the board, not as CEO, not as anything important. Just as someone who wants to make this right, if you'll have me." Agnes studied him. He looked different than he had 6 weeks ago, older somehow, more human. The legend had been stripped away, leaving just a man who'd made terrible choices and was trying to figure out how to live with them. "I'd like that," she said finally. "Yes." Tim's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you. That means thank you." Wayne glanced at his watch. "Mom, we should go. You said you wanted to—" "Right, yes." Agnes looked at Tim. "We have somewhere we need to be." "Of course. I'll see you Monday for the lab tour." "Monday," Agnes confirmed. The cemetery was quiet on weekday afternoons. Agnes and Wayne walked the familiar path to the bench near the oak tree, where a simple military headstone marked the resting place of Captain Marcus Quinn, husband and father, who'd lost both arms in combat and inspired his wife to dedicate her life to giving mobility back to those who'd lost it. Agnes sat on the bench, Wayne beside her. For a long time, neither spoke. "I used to come here," Agnes said finally, "after I got out of the clinic, when I was still trying to piece together who I was. I'd sit here and look at his name on that stone and know that he was important to me, that we had something. But I couldn't remember what." "That must have been awful," Wayne whispered. "It was like reading a story about someone else's life." Agnes's hands twisted in her lap. "I knew I'd been married. I knew I'd been a scientist, but it felt like facts, not memories. Like someone had told me about a person named Agnes Quinn who'd existed once but wasn't me." Wayne leaned his head on her shoulder. "But you remember now?" "I remember." Agnes smiled through her tears. "I remember meeting him at a conference. I remember the way he laughed. I remember the day he came home from Afghanistan without his arms and said, 'Well, I guess you'll have to open all the jars now.' Even then he was joking. He sounds like he was amazing. He was, and he's why I did all of it. The research, the Neuralink, everything. I wanted to give people like him their lives back. Agnes looked at the headstone. Someone asked me yesterday why I never came forward before, why I didn't fight to reclaim my work sooner. What did you tell them? I told them the truth. Agnes's voice broke. I didn't remember I'd lost it. How do you fight for something when you don't even know it was stolen? They sat in silence, letting the enormity of that truth settle over them like snow. A wheelchair approached from the path. Tim Collins, alone this time. He stopped several feet away, respectful of the distance. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't mean to intrude. I visit a memorial nearby. My parents. I saw you and I'll go. You can stay, Agnes said quietly, at a respectful distance. Tim wheeled a little closer but kept several feet between them. He looked at Marcus Quinn's headstone, read the inscription. He was a soldier, Tim said. He was my soldier. Agnes smiled sadly. He's why I did this work. Why it mattered so much to get it right. I couldn't save him, but I thought maybe I could save someone like him. You did, Tim said softly. The Neuralink has helped thousands of veterans, amputees, people with spinal cord injuries. Your work, it saved lives, Agnes, changed them, made them worth living again. I know. Agnes stood, walked to the headstone, placed her hand on the cold marble. I know it helped people, and that's something. Even if my name wasn't on it, even if I couldn't remember creating it, it still helped people. That's very generous of you, Tim said. Agnes turned to face him. I'm not being generous. I'm being honest. The technology worked. It mattered. And maybe that's enough. It's not enough, Tim said fiercely. You deserved credit. You deserved recognition. You deserved everything they stole from you. Yes, Agnes agreed. I did, but I'm choosing not to let that theft define the rest of my life. She looked at Wayne, at Tim, at the headstone. I'm choosing to move forward, to do the work I was meant to do, to remember who I am. Tim nodded slowly. I'm in therapy now, he said abruptly. 3 times a week, trying to figure out how to live without hiding, how to look at myself in the mirror without seeing a fraud. That's good, Agnes said. That's a start. My therapist says I need to forgive myself, but I don't think I can. Tim's voice cracked. How do you forgive yourself for stealing someone's entire life? Agnes considered this. I don't know if you do, she said honestly. But maybe you don't need to. Maybe you just need to do better, be better, help more people than you hurt. I'd like to try, Tim said, if you'll let me. Agnes walked back to the bench, sat down beside Wayne. Then try. Serve on the foundation board. Fund research. Make sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else. She paused. But understand something, Mr. Collins. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for all the other people who've been erased, whose work was stolen, whose names were forgotten. I'm doing this for them. I understand, Tim said, and I'll do everything I can to help. He wheeled away, leaving Agnes and Wayne alone with Marcus's memory. Monday morning arrived with autumn sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows on the 3rd floor of Collins Dynamics, the newly renovated research wing built on the bones of the old lab where everything had burned 15 years ago. Agnes stood in the doorway of her new laboratory, Wayne beside her, and stared at the space that was hers. Clean white walls, state-of-the-art equipment, a team of researchers who'd be arriving within the hour. And at the front of the room, a massive glass whiteboard, pristine and waiting. It's perfect, Mom, Wayne said, his voice filled with awe. Agnes walked to the whiteboard, picked up a black marker, uncapped it. The chemical smell brought memories flooding back. Good ones this time. Late nights in the old lab, the thrill of breakthrough, the elegant satisfaction of an equation that finally worked. She wrote slowly, carefully, in the looping, precise handwriting that had started all of this. Neural empathy isn't about machines learning humans. It's about humans remembering to feel. Below it, she added, Dr. Agnes Marie Quinn Wayne took a photo with his phone. First day of the rest of your life. Our lives, Agnes corrected, pulling her son into a hug. You're in college next year, baby. Computer science at MIT, full scholarship. Only because my mom's a genius and the university wants to recruit her as a consultant, Wayne teased. Take it, Agnes laughed. Take every advantage they offer you. You've earned it. Behind them, the elevator chimed, that familiar soft tone that had become the soundtrack to Agnes's reclaimed life. Down the hall on the 37th floor, in Tim Collins's old office, a maintenance worker was carefully removing the framed patent certificate from the wall. It would be replaced with something new, a photograph of the entire research team, Agnes at the center, her name finally where it belonged. In the lobby, tourists and employees passed the bronze plaque, many stopping to take photos, to read the quote, to wonder about the woman whose words had become the company's foundation. And in the new lab on the third floor, Dr. Agnes Marie Quinn picked up her marker and began writing equations on the whiteboard, continuing the work that had been interrupted 15 years ago, reclaiming not just her name, but her purpose, her passion, her life. Wayne watched his mother work, saw the way her hand moved with absolute certainty across the glass, and felt something settle in his chest. They'd survived, they'd fought, they'd won, not just justice, but something more important. They would won her name back, and with it, her future. The elevator chimed again, distant and clear, marking the passage of time and the arrival of something new. Somewhere on the 37th floor, an old frame came down, and in its place, something true was finally hung. If this story moved you, share the moment. Don't let it fade. Follow Motherland Stories and tap that like button to keep these voices alive. Every day, we uncover strong stories, raw truths, and quiet acts of courage that shape our world. Join a circle of listeners, dreamers, and changemakers, because every story deserves to be heard. This wasn't just an episode, it was a call to remember. Silence hides injustice. Courage exposes it. At Motherland Stories, we don't turn away. We bear witness. Subscribe and stand with stories that challenge power and celebrate truth.